Recently on Timcast IRL, we were hanging out with Andy No. Andy No asked if he thought it was wrong that people on the right will refer to those on the left in their entirety as communists or Marxists. His point was that the left calls everyone on the right fascists, and so everyone on the right just calls them communists, and it's wrong to do so. I argued. I said, no, Andy, I disagree. It is correct to call them communists. I have data to back this up. You see, my point was as such. The left will call literally everyone on the right fascists, despite the quote unquote culture war right being ideologically diverse. That is, people who are associated with the right could be liberal in the true sense, social liberal, traditional liberal, classical liberal. These all mean things. They could be post-liberal. They could be actually fairly leftist on economic policy, but be very anti-war, anti-establishment. If you're someone like Jimmy Dore, for instance, who is a socialist for the most part, I think he self-identifies. I'm not trying to drag Jimmy. I'm a fan of Jimmy. He's great. But he's anti-establishment, calls it the war machine. And we agree on the corruption of the uniparty, Democrats, Republicans, but we're all right wing. You can be pro-choice. You can be pro-life. You can be pro-progressive tax. You can be pro-flat tax. Doesn't matter. You're right wing. So you have this disparate group of people who are anti-establishment, all called fascist. That is incorrect. On the right, however, you have the correct assessment that whether or not these people self-identify as communists, they vote and support the same thing. Now, of course, the left makes that argument about the right. They say, yeah, see, you're saying you're not a fascist, but you're supporting fascism. Incorrect. Many libertarians that are called fascists hate Donald Trump with a passion and are accused of having Trump derangement syndrome. We identify these situations when they arise. But you end up with progressive leftists who are socialist and or not just liberal, but they will, regardless of Joe Biden, actually get behind the policies and defend them for their policies. I will give you an example. Kyle Kulinski, he's gotten the today and yesterday. He really went off in such a way that I find to be horrifying and evidence, at least in this one instance, as an example of what I'm trying to say. Kyle Kulinski said, the original press conference from the New York Attorney General laying out the details of the fraud case against Trump was overwhelming. Anybody who thinks this is a witch hunt is either totally ignorant to the facts, lying, or has full cult brain. To which Carl Benjamin, I said, I tweeted in response, this is what we're up against. No trial needed. Judge just decides because the government said so in a press conference. I'm actually surprised that Kyle supports rule by decree and summary judgments without trials. The New York Times reported that the judge said effectively deciding there was no trial needed to determine that Trump had committed fraud and that his organizations should be dissolved. Kyle made several comments about the value of Mar-a-Lago, as have many on the left, and they're just lies. They're wrong. And that's crazy to me. You know, on Timcast IRL, we're not perfect. We're not geniuses. We're just people. And we have varying different ideas. And I'm often wrong. Guests are often wrong. And we try to be right. And our audience, they watch, they comment, and sometimes correct us. But you will find arguments. For instance, Carl Benjamin and I fiercely debated the death penalty. We did not agree. We are ideologically opposed. I oppose the death penalty. Will never be convinced to support it. Sorry. Have a nice day. And people make assumptions about what my views are because there is a predominant anti-death penalty and a dominant pro-death penalty. So no. These arguments exist and we debate them. Kyle Kulinski doesn't understand how property values work. Many people are tweeting that Trump overinflated the value of his property, defrauding his lenders, which is a lie. Why? Anybody who's bought property knows that the banks they order a third party appraisal. The appraisal then determines the value. And if the value is not correct, then your loan is no good. Plus, there's inspection periods. There's a whole bunch of there are brokers that represent each and sometimes both. And there's disclosures for all this. Nobody was harmed. But the point here is not so much to rehash a story I already covered, but to point out Kyle Kulinski is a communist. Now, look, what I mean to say here is Kyle Kulinski has leftist political views and ideologies pertaining to how we distribute resources. And he also believes in authoritarian rule by decree as so long as the government says so. That is, in essence, communism. Perhaps it's fair to say, Andy is correct in that it's a bit of an umbrella. But we're talking about a group of ideologies pertaining to class-based views, critical class theory, gender theory, and race theory, for which Kyle Kulinski would fall under, combined with authoritarian rule by decree. This is a representation of communism in all of its forms as it has existed, or I'm sorry, I should say, as they tried to make it exist. Carl Benjamin said, it's just like you said, man. They all become communists in the end. And I have the data. I know, I'll pull up a graph in a second. Mike Cernovich responds, yep, it's a race for power now. In the interest of self-preservation, even libertarians, so-called, must accept this. Take power or be prepared for show trials for everyone. Trump is only their test case. Everyone else is next. This is the point. Fine, call Kyle Kulinski an authoritarian. He's saying because the attorney general gave a press conference, it's overwhelming and if you disagree, you're in a cult. Okay, I think Trump may have committed crimes, for sure. I think there should be a trial. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is not a criminal case. I think Trump may have lied or something. Fine. There should be a trial and an opportunity for his team to make their defense. However, Kyle Kulinski is now in support of a judge sanctioning lawyers, not to mention all the people on the left who support the prosecution of Trump's legal team. Jenna Ellis had no reason to be charged. In the charging documents in Georgia, she's charged on counts 1 and 2, which were basically just being part of a conspiracy. That's it. Literally, because she's a lawyer, she's part of a conspiracy. What did she do? She offered Trump legal advice. Yes, this is insanity. Call it authoritarianism, fine. I say when you combine critical theory with authoritarianism, you are talking about a facet, a form of communism. And I think it's fair to say they're communists. They are not libertarians. They are not saying things like we want to be hippies on a farm. They're not saying, I think we should share resources and have community ownership, but we need to have the rights of the individual. No, they're saying outright, it doesn't matter. The lady gave a press conference. That's enough. You're in a cult if you don't agree. Wow. It's funny when they say that about me. My position has never been if you disagree with me, you're in a cult. My position is if you blindly march in lockstep, regardless of the evidence, you're in a cult. There's more to it than that. I refer to it as the cult because, I don't know, there's videos of them sitting around with their hands up, chanting and things like that. Here's your data. The 2016 electorate. Red is Trump, blue is Clinton. This is a dual axis graph showing the social and identity dimension as well as the economic dimension. What you find is that the people who vote for Trump are, I guess if you were to find the bulk of it, centrists. That's right. Are they far right? They're not actually far right economically. They are opposed to the social and identity views of wokeness. Unsurprising. They oppose the cult. See? Take a look at this. You have actual communists voting for Donald Trump. I'm not kidding. On the economic dimension, you actually have several people who are super far left who are in the Trump camp. Why? I don't know. I would probably fall here in the slightly left of center economic position, but away from the social identity dimension. Probably not all the way up to the far end, but closer to the middle. What you see for Hillary Clinton on this graph is that the bulk of Clinton voters are clustered in one space as far left and as woke as possible. That's why we say communists. It is not correct to assess the disparate economic views and different views on race and social identity, because you actually have, even among Trump voters, a range from 0 to 1. So it goes from 1 to -1. So you have center. It's mostly 0.75 to 1. Basically, Trump voters are opposed to social identity issues in the way that Democrats are in favor of them. But you can see that many of the Trump voters, a large portion, are still somewhat in agreement on many of these issues. For the left to refer to all of these people as in a cult, despite the fact that they're actually center economically and not even absolutely opposed to wokeness, it's incorrect. You have people who are economic leftists. You can see on the left. Now, among the Democrat voters, do you have people on the right? A spattering of some, but they're moderately on the right economically. Moderately. I'm saying outright, Trump has voters who are as far left as possible, and even a few points that reach out into the far right. This is economics, not social issues. Trump voters, there are even some, these are fascists down here, by the way. Trump even has voters who overlap with Democrats. To be fair, Democrats also have voters that overlap with Trump. Of course, that's the case, because I'm not talking about absolutes. My point is this. While it is, if you look at it, you can see two bulks. You can see that Democrats reach out into a similar space away from identity issues. We know this to be true. The core, the largest voting bloc for Democrats in 2016 was as far left and as far woke as possible, whereas Trump's base was actually much wider in terms of economics, but opposing wokeness. My point. Yes, in the simplest of terms, it is silly to refer to literally every single leftist as a communist. The problem we have is that go to any Democrat and ask them, what is a woman? 99% of the time, they will say, why are you asking? What's your definition? I mean, these definitions don't make sense. We get it. You're in a cult. Go to the average person who is considered right, and you will get deep criticism of Donald Trump. You will get deep support for Donald Trump. You will get a lot of concern over Trump's foreign policy and a lot of support for his foreign policy. Now, I understand there are many Democrats that could provide something similar, but what I am talking about is a generality and an inversion. What I'm saying is, typically among the quote unquote right, as exemplified by Timcast IRL, we have hippy dippy Ian, who doesn't really fall anywhere. He's not conservative. He's not necessarily liberal, but he's probably more liberal than conservative. We have some people who are deeply conservative, some who are just libertarian. Phil Labonte, for instance, is mostly just libertarian. Luke Rudkowski, frequent guest, rags on Trump all the time. But this is the quote unquote right. When we bring on high profile personalities on the left, they tend to all march in lockstep. They agree. They don't give interviews. They avoid these hard conversations. They tend to just parrot whatever it is the machine is saying, even if it's contradictory. How is it that they say Tim Pool used to be liberal, but now he's right? Well, it's because the left went nuts, right? So I say something like, war is bad. And they go, yes, war is bad. 10 years later, we're at war in Ukraine. And I'm like, wow, war is bad. And they go, you're a Russian propagandist and far right. That's my point. I think this graph sums up basically what I'm trying to say. It is a generality to call everyone on the left a communist. But to be fair, to Andy No's point, I'm not saying that anyone you ever meet on the left will be a communist. I am saying, however, many of these people refuse to speak up, refuse to speak out to challenge what is overt communism, which is progressive values beaten into people with authoritarianism. That's how I'm describing it. This distribution of wealth by force and decree by government. That is a tendency among the left. And I think to see Kyle Kulinski espousing this shows it. Kyle Kulinski, who once defended Sargon of Akkad and said, no, come on, stop insulting him. He's not a bad guy. And I liked Kyle for that. But to see these people come out and just start doubling down on rule by decree, fine, call them whatever you want. Maybe it's not communism. I just think if they're authoritarian progressives, we call them communists. They believe in critical theory, call them communists. Call it whatever you want. Neo-Marxism, neo-communism, authoritarianism, fine, whatever. The point is the same. It is an authoritarian cult. That's what it is. The Trump supporters, please, if you could only get them to agree on things. Certainly Trump has his core base that believe crazy things. That's true. But that's the minority. And that's what I mean by a generality and inversion. It is the minority of people on the right who are cultists for Trump. It is most people on the right who actually argue about it all the time. And it's what the left defines as the right wing. And it is the majority of people on the left who march in lockstep behind ideas with no logic behind them. Ultimately, what you'll find, if you're on the left, they'll say the same about the right. If you're on the right, they'll say the same about the left. Okay, but Donald Trump did not bring out the military. Donald Trump did not mercilessly beat, arrest, and hunt down Antifa. He didn't do any of these things. Donald Trump didn't actually go after Hillary Clinton. Some say he should have. The left is doing all these things. Donald Trump didn't. Republicans aren't prosecuting Democrats. Republicans didn't go after Hunter Biden. They could have. They didn't. It's amazing, isn't it? That's my point. I think I'm mostly just upset to see what Kyle Kulinski's become, because it's a shockingly authoritarian stance for him to take. And it is what it is. This is what we're up against. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.